Hello, everyone, and welcome to the That Was Stupid podcast. I am your host, John Seidel, and I am so excited to have you here. That Was Stupid is a new podcast that is all about decisions that people have made that at the time, people said that was stupid, right? But they ended up being either life-changing or life-giving or changing the world, changing their community. And so I wanted to talk about those stories because I think there are a lot more of those stories out there than we think. And I hope it encourages you to maybe take chances, maybe do something different, maybe break from what everyone else has told you you have to do. And I think what you're going to see in this episode is exactly what I was hoping that that the podcast would be. And so today we are talking with Kirsten Mueller-Daubermann. Now, you may know her by a different name. Her former name was Kirsten Haglund, and she became one of the youngest winners of Miss America. And she won that in 2008 as Miss Michigan. And so she went on from winning Miss America to being on seemingly every TV program that you can imagine as a political commentator. And then really one day she realized, listen, I'm actually contributing to the problem and not the solution. And she quit TV. She moved to Switzerland, and now she lives in Switzerland with her husband and her dog, Elsa. And so today we are going to talk about what went into that decision, what people said about that decision at the time, and why she actually feels confident that she made the right decision. But you're also going to hear that there are maybe not regrets, but there are things that she wishes she would have done differently. And along the way, you're going to hear some really kind of insider details of her time at Fox News. You're going to hear some details about her own life that, frankly, I hadn't heard before. And I have known Kirsten since 2015. We met in 2015 on a trip to Israel and really hit it off. And I am so excited to have her as one of the inaugural guests on the That Was Stupid podcast. Before we get into it, remember to please like this episode, subscribe to the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel as well. All right, let's get into it. Without further ado, Kirsten Mueller-Daubermann is our guest, and here we go. So, Kirsten, thank you so much for coming on the That Was Stupid podcast, one of our inaugural guests, which I am excited for because you and I have been friends since about 2015, I think. Is when we went on that trip to Israel together. So thank you so much from all the way across the pond and in Europe. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. A joy to be on your podcast, John.
So as the audience knows, and as you know, we talk about decisions that you have made in your life and with people who have made incredible decisions that maybe at the time everyone or a lot of people are like, that was stupid, right? But then ended up being life-changing, life-giving, like all fill in the blank there. And so you came to mind. Obviously, everyone first kind of got to know you as Kirsten Haglund when you won Miss America 2008. And but now, you know, you're living in Switzerland. And so it's like you go from Miss America to Switzerland, and there's a great story in between there. So maybe just walk us through a little bit of those early years, because people may not know the full story of how you were crowned Miss America and kind of the incredible way that happened, in the sense of you were like the youngest one. So maybe just walk us through that first.
Sure. Well, I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, and I was 17 years old and graduating from high school, preparing to go to university. And in the process of doing lots of scholarship applications and trying to find a way to afford college, I became aware that the Miss America organization provided scholarships for girls who chose to compete in the program. And so I thought, this will be a pretty easy thing for me. You were required to perform a talent, and I was a dancer and a singer. And so I thought, easy, I can just prepare a song that I've been working with my voice teacher on. No problem there. I wore my prom dress, my senior prom dress, as my evening gown in the formal wear competition.
Oh, that's
And
great.
I thought it would be no stress. I could win a couple $100 and go on my merry way. It's also funny that at that point I was so naive as to the cost of education that I thought a couple $100 in scholarship would actually help. But that was my mindset at the time. I entered a local competition, Miss Oakland County, where I grew up. And at the end of my senior year of high school, I won that competition, which was a massive surprise to me. And then that required me to, a year later, compete at the Miss Michigan pageant. And so I did that with zero expectations of winning and really very little desire to actually win. I was going to a conservatory of music in Ohio studying musical theater. I loved it there. I was very excited about my career trajectory and all that that held. But then I won Miss Michigan and I had to leave school. Of course, I won more scholarship, which was great. Now we're up into the thousands of dollars making progress.
Woo!
And so then I left school. I spent the year traveling the state of Michigan and speaking. What a lot of people don't realize is that the Miss America organization, in contrast to Miss USA or other beauty competitions, which are essentially modeling competitions, Miss America has a much more community service component. While it is essentially still a beauty competition, during the year you do lots of events, you do lots of speaking, you can really have autonomy to create a platform of service that you care about, do advocacy campaigns, etc. So I spent that year working on advocacy for mental health issues, specifically eating disorders, which I had struggled with as a teenager. And so that was a topic that I was very passionate about. And I just tried to enjoy that opportunity to speak, to earn scholarship dollars with no expectation of going further. And then, long story short, I went to the Miss America competition in Las Vegas, Nevada in January 2008 and competed against 52 other women because at that time we also had a Miss District of Columbia and Miss Virgin Islands as well. And I won. And I was totally shocked. And so in the course of a year and a half only, my life had gone from being a very average suburban Midwest girl to being at this pinnacle of the American ideal, Miss America, your ideal, you know how they say. So I really stumbled into it. And I think a lot of people have the perception that girls who do this compete year after year, they devote their whole lives to it. They're really very shallow and vapid, I should say. And some may be, but that was not my plan to win Miss America, but I did. And it changed my life forever, obviously, as it would. But it opened me up to a whole new bevy of opportunities and career paths, opened a lot of doors. And it was both a blessing and a curse.
So I want to get into that for sure. But what was, going through your mind that moment, when they, I don't know who it was at that point. Was it Billy Bean or whoever would, announcing the winner? Like when they say Miss Michigan, right? What went through your mind?
I mean, to be honest, I think the first thing that went through my mind was how am I supposed to react? Because you see so many videos online of girls, with their mouths wide open and crying or screaming or freaking out in some way. And I felt very calm. And to be honest, John, and I've spoken with several other former Miss Americas about this too, so many of us had this feeling that we just knew it was going to be us, like the day before or the day of, this strange premonition. And I had that as well. And it terrified me. And so I kind of knew, I had known it was coming. So I felt very calm, but then I thought, okay, I should act surprised. Oh, I put on my best surprise face. And then to be honest, I was really frightened because this was a whole new level of exposure and potential criticism. And of course it's exciting, but there's so many ways for you to fail quite publicly. in that capacity. And so I was really frightened, to be honest. And I think at that moment, just trying to make sure that the crown didn't fall off my head and I didn't do anything stupid in the last moments of the telecast to embarrass my family or my state and make it to the end of the broadcast without losing an earring.
So, by the way, we're going to get into the blessing and the curse part, but there's actually a story that I've heard you tell. You talk about like making sure the crown doesn't come off or make a fool of yourself. There was I think it was like a morning news appearance, and it involved a cake and a fan.
Oh, pancake.
Tell that story. Yeah, or pancake. Yes, tell that story real quick because I love that story.
A pancake. One of the partners of the Miss America organization is Children's Miracle Network hospitals. They're 170 hospitals across the U.S. which provide care for very sick children free of cost. And we do many events with them throughout the year, visit children in hospitals all the time, and then do their big fundraising events. One of their major fundraisers for the year is IHOP, which is International House of Pancakes, for those of you who don't know, which it's not technically international because we have no IHOPs in Switzerland.
Yeah. They're lying. They're lying.
Lies. IHOP's National Pancake Day. And so I, as Miss America, I was at an IHOP for about 6 hours in the morning doing a national media tour. I was standing in front of a pancake griddle with an IHOP apron and my Miss America crown on. I had a IFB in my ear and a camera in front of me, and I was going live to cities across the country promoting National Pancake Day, trying to get people to go out to their local IHOP and get a free short stack of IHOP pancakes in exchange for your donation to Children's Miracle Network hospitals. And as a part of this shtick, I was standing in front of a griddle with cooking pancakes. I had a ladle. I had the mixture. And John, I can cook now, and actually I love to cook, and I think I'm a pretty good cook. My husband would say I'm a pretty good cook. But at that point, I had literally cooked, nothing. And I'm at this griddle pretending like I'm making pancakes. And the host in Seattle, I remember very vividly, was Seattle. He said, "Oh, you're standing in front of that griddle, Miss America. You want to give a pancake a flip?" And people pleaser that I am, I said, "Sure." And so didn't check to see if, there were the appropriate bubbles around the side to see if it was ready to flip or anything. So I just stuck the spatula underneath and gave it a flip, and it flew up into the dough everywhere. And there's a fan going on. It hits the fan. Dough, wet stuff goes flying. It didn't go on me, but everyone in the crew was like, "Oh." And they were cracking in my ear. This sounds fake, John, but I'm not making it up. It was the most embarrassing thing that's probably ever happened in my life.
And you'll be happy to know, I think the last time we talked about this, I went and searched for the clip and I could not find it. No. And I'm like, I guess that's before, you think about 2008, like that's before, even the term viral. Yeah, exactly. Like now that would have been just like all over the place, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, and also if you think about it from their perspective, from the camera, they couldn't see the fan. And they couldn't see the whole thing. They could just see me reacting crazily and probably guess what happened. So from a visual perspective, it probably didn't give you the same fulfillment of actually being there and being me.
Right.
But it was pretty ridiculous. One of many epic fails during my year.
Well, and so let's kind of fast forward just a little bit. Is so you win Miss America, you're flipping pancakes, literally stuff is hitting the fan. But you talked about it being a little bit of a curse. And so maybe that analogy works a little bit of like stuff hitting the fan. Like, what do you mean by that?
I mean, many people wish for fame, for recognition, for success. And when you receive it so suddenly and at such a young age and in such a way that you didn't really desire or want, it sets up a lot of internal conflict. Additionally, you're kind of, as a public figure, you're kind of treated like public property. Like people can just say whatever they want to you, make their opinions about you on the internet or to your face without much care or concern that you're an actual human being with feelings. And that's can get really harsh and difficult, especially, I mean, and I know men and women face this equally. So I'm not trying to say women are the only ones who experience this, but especially as a woman in a position who is seemingly elevated for her beauty or beauty ideal. You just, if you don't fit the ideal in someone else's head, then you're castigated for your not meeting up to their standard. But I would say also, I mean, it's incredibly isolating the year, because you travel around the country, you live out of a suitcase, you're literally going from city to city, traveling about 20,000 miles a month. So it's very lonely. And then your life is irrevocably changed, so long as you live in the United States. Hence a key to the story here. But everything after that, you never can really know. Are you here because of what you bring to the table, your intelligence, your accomplishments, your worth as a person? Are you there because of that, or are you there because the door opened because you are Miss America? And that always, maybe perhaps for some people that wouldn't bother them, but for me, it always really bothered me. I didn't
from the beginning. I mean, from very early on.
Yes, very much. Because I didn't feel like I had necessarily earned, or I was always questioning whether I had earned the opportunities or the things that I received based on my merit, value, or worth, or based on the fact that I had a title attached to my name, one that I never really sought out to begin with. So that was pretty tough.
So you're the people that don't know, and you've kind of alluded to this, you retain the title for a year. I mean, you'll always be Miss America 2008, but you're basically on, for lack of a better term, active duty as Miss America for a year. And so 2009 hits, and what do you kind of start doing? Do you kind of live in that limbo of questioning your accomplishments for a few years? Because then you did end up, kind of, you're on TV, whether it's, guest appearances on CNN or Fox or whatnot. So how did you go from maybe having some of those doubts, but then you kind of go all in on the TV side of things?
Well, after about a year of continuing to travel and do speaking engagements, because there are many speaking gigs and events that you want to do during your year as Miss America, but you can't because the schedule doesn't allow at the time. And so they want to hire you for after your year. And so I spent most of 2009 and then years after that traveling and speaking, doing a lot of great work with different organizations that I'd always wanted to work with. And that was extremely fulfilling. And that I did feel like I had earned in some sense. And that was very rewarding work. I moved out to California. I went back into the entertainment world because that was what I had studied in school, and thought that I would go back to that career path. But I realized that I had changed so much as a person, and that I couldn't go back to being a performer in that way. And I'd established a different identity. And so after about a year in Los Angeles, I decided to go back to school and finish my bachelor's degree. So I moved back to Atlanta, went to Emory University, studied political science because that was something I'd always loved. And then continued to get requests to come up to New York and be on cable news. And these were contacts that I had from my year as Miss America. And I had been on shows a few times, and they appreciated what I had to say as a contributor, talking about the culture, talking about the beauty industry, talking about women. And then eventually would go into politics and culture, and they liked what I had to say about this or that. And so they kept inviting me on, and that eventually became, very significant work for me. And so after I finished my bachelor's degree, I moved up to New York City, started that work full time, doing television and radio and podcasts, and continuing to travel and speak. And it was crazy. Yeah, I was on that path, and it was enjoyable from the standpoint of, the reason that I enjoyed doing television, talking about politics, was because I had always wanted to try to help people to see things from a different perspective, to deconstruct issues, to get into the nitty-gritty about culture and philosophy and politics. But what really happened, and I know we'll get to this, is that after several years of being inside that industry, I just saw that I wasn't helping, that I was contributing to the problem. And that's eventually why I left.
So I want to back up just a second. You had talked about going back out to LA and kind of pursuing the entertainment. Did you have any like moments of, in a sense, like grieving the life that you thought you were going to live, and then you're like, but that, you talked about you became a different person, right? Was there ever a moment of kind of grieving that different person that you had become?
Not at that point, because once I made the decision to go back to school and pursue something else, and I saw some very dark sides of the entertainment industry in Los Angeles that made me really firmly believe that I did not want to do that anymore. So I was very convinced of a new direction. And so at that point, there was no grieving. But years later, and even to this day, John, I miss singing. I miss performing on stage. I miss ballet deeply. And so, yeah, I would say now as a woman in my 30s, yes, I do grieve what could have been. Of course I do. But I'm also very thankful for where I am now. But I also see that as all a part of our beautiful stories as human beings. And it's a no one gets everything that they want in life. And the dreams that we have is, God knows. And they just become a rich part of your history. And it's a beautiful thing you can tap into in the quiet moments, or, in the moments you have by yourself. You can relive those times and go back there with the music, or, whatever it may be. And it can still be rich in your memory, even if it's not a reality.
So I've heard this said, and I think it's really accurate, that and I'll butcher it a little bit, but that the true test of wisdom, in a sense, is being able to hold two opposing ideas that may seem opposed, but can live together, right? And so, you've talked about, you're kind of the unexpected Miss America, in the sense that you're not this, I know you personally, but like, you're not this, you're not the person that I think maybe even Hollywood has said beauty pageant queens are, right? And yet, did you ever feel like at that time where you're starting to maybe, you're more down home, but when I knew you, especially in New York time, I felt like you were still putting everything you had into, being someone on TV, not in a haughty way, not in a prideful way, but you just do whatever you do with passion, right? And so that kind of opposing idea that on one hand you can kind of be, as you described yourself, the kind of the suburban Midwestern young woman, but still be striving for some of that. Like, would you say that's accurate, that you still were striving to do that because you had put yourself in that position?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It was both. And that was why I think it eventually got to a point where I realized I couldn't live with that duality anymore. But yes, I did want it because it feels good to be on TV. It feels good to have people listen to your opinion. To have an outlet to be able to say and say something and contribute to a conversation and wear great dresses and get your hair and makeup done. It's great. It's really nice. It can be very glamorous. And also, I really was driven by the mission that I thought I could contribute good to the world. So it was both. It was both. It was very enjoyable, and also I wanted to do something good. But at the same time, in the back of my head, or another thought was always, I was always, even in that aspect, I was performing.
No.
Television is a performance. Even radio, to some extent, is a performance.
Yep.
And I knew how to perform. And finally, one day, I just said, I'm not performing this anymore because it's too damaging.
Okay, so let's go there. So what year is it? Let's say, you're kind of...
2016.
Okay, so
Trump got elected.
2016. When did you... is that when you first started feeling like, okay, I can't make a difference?
Yes.
And so how long then you were basically, though, had been doing that for what, 5, 6, 7 years?
Yeah. Yes.
So was there like a moment, was there for lack of a better term, an incident? What was the moment you said, okay, I'm out?
It was a coalescing of a few things. One was that, sorry to get political for people,
That's
but
okay.
I began very political issues. And the content always mattered to me. I was never one of those people that was just doing it to do the job. The content of what I was speaking about mattered. And when I first started to do television, I was very conservative in my politics. And that was a result of being raised in a more conservative, politically conservative family and coming from the Midwest. And in examining my own views, I believed in some conservative economic principles, cultural principles, but really I was saying what I needed to say because that was what pleased the hosts and producers. And I said it well, and I said it convincingly. And then as I got older and got more life experience and really started to lean into what do I, Kirsten, really believe rather than what does Kirsten, the blonde mouthpiece on Fox, what would she say in this position? I started to really have a struggle with what I felt like I was supposed to be saying on television versus what I actually believed. Then the 2015-2016 presidential election starts to happen. And I was doing most of my work in conservative media, and Trump comes about and he starts to gain popularity and sympathy. And now it's interesting. We actually, those of us who've competed in the Miss America organization, have a bit of a history with Donald Trump in that in the 90s, he actually tried to take over the Miss America organization. We said, we're a nonprofit and we don't want to have anything to do with you. So he bought the Miss Universe organization and he vamped up the Miss USA program to make it very sexy, even much more beauty focused than it had been before that. And so we had a history of some animosity with Donald Trump before he ever was on the political stage. I had already had a not very high opinion of who he was. And then he started to gain more prominence, and I just knew inside of myself that to remain prominent on conservative media, like I was going to have to support him and go all in to support Trump. And I couldn't personally because of all of those reasons I just mentioned. And women I knew that he had treated poorly, very, very poorly. And I just couldn't support that. And so then I became anathema on the more conservative shows and then started to get booked on a lot more liberal shows as the, conservative voice who wasn't a fan of Trump. But I just saw, and then just, John, and everyone knows just the division and the partisanship and the animosity that was just spreading throughout all media, right and left at that time. And I just realized that I was contributing to more of the division than I was doing anything good. So, and that coupled with all of the Me Too stuff that was happening, the disintegration of Roger Ailes' term at Fox, Gretchen Carlson, who had been a kind of a role model to me at that time, and all of the things that were coming out of Fox, it was, I saw those women in the industry very clearly then at that point and said, if this is not where I want to be as a woman in my career in 20 years, why am I staying in this? That makes no sense. And so, it was kind of all those things coming together.
So 2 questions in there. Gretchen Carlson, former Fox News host, who is also a former Miss America. Did you guys have some conversations when you were kind of deciding or when these feelings kind of came up? Because she in one sense did the same thing, right? She left. She got out of it. If you see her, if you look at her, her Twitter feed now and Facebook page, like I feel like a lot of where you are right now, right? Very similar. So have you guys talked about that? Did you get some encouragement and advice from her?
Not related to this particularly, but we had many conversations throughout my years of being at Fox and seeking her advice and her sharing with, and she was always, it's so interesting in retrospect that she was always so eager to help and so wonderful, but also, she really urged me to be smart, to be cautious. You always felt like there was a bit of a warning behind her encouragement, not like, yeah, go after, go be the next Megyn Kelly, you know, kind of thing. You could always sense from her. She was always smart. She was always turned on to what was going on. And I think that was why her caution. And I sensed that from her. And I think that's part of what, you know, and in sense and everything that's happened, you know, I think she's so brave in what she has done, whether, you know, anyone agrees with her politics or not. She and many of the women who then ended up standing up at Fox and speaking out against abuse were incredibly brave. But yeah, she's an amazing woman.
So it's interesting. You talked about earlier on in the show, kind of those premonitions that a lot of winners of Miss America get, and so that's interesting, right? Is like maybe there were some premonitions that she was experiencing. Yep. Obviously, we've seen through the movie some of that stuff, but there was. It's interesting that there's kind of this gut feeling that still travels with you, right? Yep. Throughout.
Yeah, you know, and I think that all people have access to that, and many people just ignore it because they want success, they want money, they want fame, they want the attention, and so they ignore their gut intuition when something doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
You ignore that at your peril, I believe.
Okay, so 2016, so then you decide, I'm done. What does I'm done look like? What did that mean? Hey, I'm going to stop answering producers' calls. Did you send out an email? Like, what did I need to get away from this divisiveness look like?
It started with an opportunity that came about to go do a summer program at Oxford in the UK. And I was really wanting to just get out, plug into something with people who were connected to topics that I cared about and more philosophically inclined, and you know, just take a break. And so I took a summer off and was in the UK. And I think a change of scenery, a change of pace, a change of place, change of the people you're surrounded in opens up your mind and your eyes to new opportunities that you could pursue, new dreams that could be born, new possibilities that sometimes you can't see if you're just stuck in one place. You just feel like I'm stuck, but I don't know how to unstuck myself. And so it was that summer that really motivated me to make a change. And so I came back and said, at that point, then I said, I want to go back to school. I want to get my master's. I want to, do something completely different related to news. I still wanted to do something related to philosophy, history, topics that move people, but I didn't know what that was yet. And I thought, hey, going back to school is probably a good place to start pondering that. So I'm going to change my life. And so I went back to New York and moved out of my apartment at that time into another place, and still kept doing my TV gigs. But I also took another job on the side. I started teaching at a indoor cycling studio in New York, plugging back into my theater roots. I mean, for those people who don't know New York or that business, but most of the fitness instructors in New York are musical theater people.
Yes.
Or people with a performing background. But obviously I always loved moving and fitness. So like kind of did a side job to support myself so I didn't have to just do the media projects, and started to look into university applications and things. And then at this point I also met someone, and it all kind of happened at the same time. And so then I moved back to Michigan first, collected my things, and I mentioned to the producers that I was in contact with that I was leaving New York City, and my friends, and then I just pretty much made a break for it.
Okay, so two things. One, I think it's interesting, right? So you go to Oxford, you kind of have this change of pace and change of place, which I love that little turn of phrase. But yet when you came back, I mean, you were still doing some TV things, right? So was it like, hey, listen, I still got to, pay my rent, right? I got to do this, or maybe it's fulfill contracts. But was that a time where you kind of felt really torn?
Yeah. It was challenging. But at that point, then I was doing primarily no more conservative media, and mostly primarily more liberal or centrist news organizations. So it didn't feel as much of an internal battle for me. And I also knew that I was getting out of that. So there was a light at the end of the tunnel so to
Yeah.
speak.
Okay, so this is kind of, and you can tell us when some of those that were stupid moments kind of came up, but did friends, colleagues, acquaintances in New York, when you said, okay, I'm out, I'm packing up my stuff, I'm moving back to Michigan, what was their reaction?
Mostly, why? What are you gonna do? Like, I don't know. I don't know. And then I had met this wonderful guy. He lived in Zurich. I went to Europe a few times. He came to New York to visit me, and I was like, I've always wanted to live in Europe. Maybe there's a university I can go to in Europe. Let's try it. And so I decided to move. And yeah, I mean, but honestly, also, John, I mean, many people were very happy for me. The people that were closest to me who had not, because I had a lot of friends, quote unquote friends in the media business who I thought would remain true to who they said they were and what they believed. And yet they all turned to support Trump 1,000%. And so those were more the people who didn't necessarily understand. There's a few who really supported me, but most just kind of then they just drop you. But many people were experiencing a lot of similar feelings as I was, to be honest. A lot of internal conflict. But I think, but I just didn't care about the success or the fame or being on TV anymore. So that wasn't an issue for me. But many people were very supportive, to be honest. Many people knew that I was in a place of a lot of pain and a lot of internal struggle, and many wished me very well. So I also did, yeah, I think from a worldly perspective, people thought like, that's really pretty stupid. But I also had some very good friends who were very supportive.
And so you go back to Michigan, you meet your husband, Amadeus.
Yeah.
Now husband. Great guy, which you talk about, like him going to New York, you going to Zurich, and then in the middle of that, you guys came to Dallas, visited my wife and I. We had a great dinner. I got to meet him, which I love because my grandpa came from Germany, and I remember you, Kirsten. And if I can't say this, I'm sorry, but you're like, now listen. He's German, so there's like not a lot of emotion. Like, so don't be shocked if like when you're talking to him, you may feel like he's not really receiving it, but he really is.
Yeah, it's a whole It is. People think, okay, the West is one culture. No. Continental European culture versus American culture is so different. Massive cultural differences. And yes, we have more alike in Western Europe and the United States versus, countries in East Asia, for example, or the Indian subcontinent. So we have more similarities there. But I mean, there are just so many cultural differences that I had to get used to. And yes, that is one of them. The Germans need a few beers before they really let out their emotions. And then they go crazy.
So what year then so you went from Michigan to Zurich. What year was that?
That was 2018.
All right. So 2018, you alluded to this earlier about like, no one, for lack of a better term, and I can't exactly remember how you said it, but like no one cares in Switzerland that you're Miss America, right? Which is part of what you were craving, right? So in a sense, were you craving anonymity? What was it that you were craving? And maybe anonymity is part of it.
At that time, what I was craving most was a new start, a blank slate, a fresh, like an opportunity to start over. And then what I found subsequently was that nobody knew and nobody cared that I was Miss America or that I was on television. In fact, as Amadeus, that's my husband's name, as he and I talked, it became more evident that it would actually probably be a hindrance in pursuing future opportunities, especially opportunities of the kind that I really wanted. And so it came off my resume It came off most of my social media profiles. Obviously, I still do work in the United States related to that title, so I keep it on some places, but I changed my name once I got married. I was able to get rid of my maiden name and take on a new name, and now it's no one knows unless they find out somehow. And every once in a while someone does, and then they want to talk about it, but it's really such a small part of my life. And so what I found now in retrospect is that everything that I have been able to achieve here and every opportunity that I have had is because of me, is because of just normal old me. Does that have anything to do with having a sparkly crown put on my head and winning a beauty pageant? And that feels incredible.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does that feel? Does it feel empowering? Like, what are some of the words you would use to describe that?
Yeah, empowering, fulfilling, satisfying. But also, it has not been easy because I moved in 2018, and then I was here for a year, a little more than a year, and then the pandemic hit. And I was experiencing some really great, both like social and professional momentum, building new professional networks and getting new clients and things in the communication sphere. So using my media skills, but in a completely different avenue, like working for corporate clients. And then everything just stopped. And Switzerland also is a more closed country socially. It's not the same networking environment as New York is, or it doesn't have the same entrepreneurial spirit as many places in the US where, oh yeah, I've got a thing for you and I can connect you with this person. We can make that happen. And I've got this opportunity. It's not like that. So momentum and that networking takes a long time to build. And so then when COVID hit, everything shut down, obviously. So that was really a big setback for me. And then also, there just came this realization. I wanted this fresh start and I was very optimistic and things are now going great. But I realized that maybe there was some stupidity or perhaps naivete in just knowing how much work it would be to restart your entire life and identity at age 32.
Yeah, which is so interesting, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, 32, you're just getting going, right? But you had lived a couple lifetimes from 18 to 32. That, what is that, 14-year period? Like the stuff that you experienced and went through is what some people just go through in an entire lifetime,
And think of how much you build upon the years of networking, professional relationships, opportunities that you build on that then create a career. Now, I was starting from absolute scratch. Couldn't build on any of my former professional network, any of my friends, any of all of that work that I had built. And I think I was in love and I was optimistic and hopeful about the world. And then, with the pandemic and then just life, it's not easy. And also it came the realization too that I did get so many things so easily because I was Miss America. And now it was just like, you don't get any of that advantage. And then also on top of that, if I could just say, my resume is very diverse. I have a lot of different experiences and areas of niche expertise. And in the United States, I believe that is more valued. Whereas here, the system is much more structured and orderly. And you have to go to certain school. They decide at a very young age which track you're going to go into, whether it's gymnasium, which is like what we would consider a typical high school, which is preparation for university. But that's very hard to get into. And you decide when you're like between 10 and 12 years old. Otherwise, you go into a school where you're going to do more of an apprenticeship or some other kind of associate's degree, what we would call. So their life is very structured and ordered for a professional path from a very young age. And if so, you try to come into the market at 32 years old with this like traveled to Africa and to Israel and been on television and also was a dancer and was Miss America and, has a bachelor's in political science. They're like, we have no idea who you are. Get out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you didn't go to this gymnasium and study this bachelor's and get this master's and this PhD and work this apprenticeship. And like everyone here has a PhD, So I'm an enigma. I'm an enigma wrapped in a mystery over here to the Swiss. So that's, and I can't change any of that. And I think I was very optimistic, but I've gotten to a place now where I've been able to create something here and build something here of my own and establish my own identity. And again, it's made that hard work that I've had to do to have a career here now and a future path so much more fulfilling because I've had to do it, and it's me, and it's based on my worth and abilities, not based on anything else.
Were there any moments of doubt? Were there ever any moments of doubt? You kind of talked about like, maybe you went into it a little bit thinking like it was going to be easier than it was. So were there ever any moments where you're like, why did I do that?
Not until the pandemic, really. Not until the end of the pandemic. When I first came, I was very optimistic and very hopeful, and things were lining up very nicely. But toward the beginning and middle of the pandemic, when everything was I was very isolated, all of my professional opportunities essentially dried up, and I saw no path forward. I had no vision, no idea what I was going to do to build a life and an identity here. That I experienced a lot of doubt, but no, and maybe some regret, but no wanting to renege on the decision or go back. Or I always was very confident that I made the right decision to leave the professional path that I was on and start something new. I just didn't know how hard it was going to be.
Yeah. When you talk about maybe a little bit of regret, what does that look like? Like, just like, man, it'd be great to, because your family's all still in Michigan. Like, it would be great to have my family, or it would be great, man, if things were a little easier. What do you mean there?
Yeah, I think regret, because I just wish I maybe had more of a plan as to which direction and that I was going to go professionally. But I couldn't really have made a plan, because who knows what it's going to be like to live in another country for a long period of time until you actually do it.
Yeah.
You can make great plans, and then you get somewhere and you start the lived experience of doing it, and it turns out completely different. So, I think sometimes I wish maybe I'd spent more time considering what a plan would be, or making some kind of projection, but I've always been really horrible at that. So I think because I have had so many things in my life that I've had a plan, and then some random life event interjected and happened to me that took me so off course, like Miss America, that it kind of instilled in me this habit of not planning, because who knows what life's going to throw at you next.
So I want to go back to something you had said. There's kind of two questions. One would be, you talked about, you're doing work with corporate clients and you're using a lot of what you did as a TV personality in a different way. And this is a question that I've talked with a lot of people in our industry, or our former industry, about, is are you ever afraid that anything that you said will come back to haunt you? And, I know in general, you talked about, like, you're someone that was giving your convictions on TV. But yet there are times where a producer, you know what the producer wants you to say, right? So were there ever any moments, or are there any feelings of that?
Oh, yeah. There are. I was so young and naive. I thought I knew things. I didn't. And I'm still young. I'm 34 years old. So I'm still young comparatively, in the grand scheme of things. But then I was in my 20s, and now I look back now, I'd be like, why should anyone be listening to a person in their 20s talk about healthcare reform? Go learn about life, So yes, there are many things that, and I think I always tried to be measured, or trying to inject an element of compassion or understanding. And that often just got smacked down quite frequently. But yeah, and I know Amadeus, to be honest, still teases me about some YouTube video clips that he's seen that he'll tease me about. And I'm like, I didn't really mean it, or that's not what I meant, or they got me caught in a soundbite and I wanted to explain for 5 more minutes and I didn't have the time. So yeah, absolutely. But those are the mistakes you make. Some people went out and did drugs and whatever, partied crazy in their 20s. I went on television and said things I didn't really know anything about. So we all have regrets.
I love that. Well, and thank you for being honest about that, right? Because I think sometimes it's like just whether in our marriages or relationships, we feel like we have to double down, right? And it's like sometimes the best thing is to say, no, actually, I shouldn't have said that, right? Or I wish I would have said that differently or approached that differently. So thank you for that. The second thing would be, and maybe this is related a little bit, but you talked about like sometimes people in Switzerland will find out, your past and who you are and the crown that you wore. What is their reaction?
The people that do end up doing enough Google searching to figure it out, it is funny how excited they get.
Really?
Yeah. It is funny. Like excited and then just absolutely fascinated because they have no concept of that over here. They kind of almost don't even know how to start asking about it. They just give you a quizzical brow, like. If you could see, if you're listening to this on the podcast, I'm furrowing my brow. They're so fascinated. They're like, how, why, what was that like? And for most people outside of the United States, their view of a pageant winter is just purely like a Miss Universe. It's only a modeling competition, which, as I explained, Miss America is quite a bit different than that. So you have to do a whole lot of education. But most people that find out are just fascinated. I'm like a animal in a zoo. They're like, what is this? What is this strange creature? But what's amazing too is that they don't dwell on it. They maybe ask once, they get the little bit of the story, and then they don't change their attitude toward me, or they don't ask anything more about it. It's not the most interesting thing that they ever want to talk to me about, and that is very refreshing.
And now, I was going to say, like, is that, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, is that, how does that feel, right? To just be able to talk about it like, hey, I once donated a kidney. Like, it's a great part of my story, right? And I love talking about it. But it's like, when I introduce myself at a party to someone new, I'm not like, hi, I'm John. I once donated a kidney to a stranger, right? But like, why do you find such fulfillment and peace in that?
Because I just don't want to be defined by it, by any means. I think everyone desires that they are evaluated based on their contributions that come from their truest self. And Miss America was far from my truest self. It was something bestowed upon me versus something that was something I worked for. And I was 19. I mean, I was a baby. And so to never have to be defined by that, to be somewhere where that is never a part of the conversation it's just magnificent. And now it makes the work that I do, especially with clients now, because I'm doing a master's degree. I'm also working with corporate clients. I also teach fitness here, indoor cycling and bar, which is ballet, yoga, Pilates all together. And when I work with people and I give them something, I interact with them, I serve them in some way, and they respond in such a wonderful way, or if people ever encourage you or say thank you or say you did a good job at something in any of my professional avenues, I know it's because of me. And it has nothing to do with them, oh, you were Miss America. It has to do with me. Same with being at university and every paper that I write and just getting a research job and all that I got because of my skills and abilities. And I think that's just a very common human trait, that you want to be recognized for your actual skills, not a facade. That just lends itself to a whole lot of internal strife, where you feel like you're living two lives, that people don't see the real you. And you're afraid that if they really saw the real you, that they would reject you, leave you, not find you qualified. But now they are seeing the real me, and they do. And this is a joy.
And you, in the same token, I think, and I've heard you say this, I believe, but like, it's not that you are still grateful for what happened and being Miss America, because I what I don't want people to hear is like, oh well, this ungrateful person. It's like, no, I mean, kind of goes back to being able to hold two opposing ideas. Like, you can be thankful for that chapter in your life and the amazing, benefits and start that it gave you, and yet still look back and say, yeah, but I wasn't getting the opportunities I didn't feel like because it was me, right? I mean, would that be accurate?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to be grateful for everything that we experience, good and bad, because it shapes you into the person you are today. So yes, in many ways, I'm so grateful, but I am also able to look back realistically and not paint it all as sunshine and rainbows.
Yes. Yes.
Because I think that's important, because every success comes at a cost. And so I think it's important, as we all reflect on our own lives and just say, okay, I had great success in this area. Whether it's something that I chose or something that was bestowed upon me, but at what cost? And so being able to be realistic about that helps keep you humble.
Yeah.
And help look at your life through a realistic lens and enjoy everything as it is temporary and not form undue attachments.
Do you ever see yourself moving back to the U.S.?
No.
That was definitive, quick, to the point, very German, Swiss of you.
Miss America to not live in the country and not plan on moving back to America.
Wait, is that true? Is that, or are you just kind of saying that facetiously?
There's no other former Miss America that lives outside the U.S. or has totally left the country.
There you go.
Just me. No, I mean, I mean, unless there was something horrible to happen with you never say never, right? You never know what life is going to bring, as I mentioned, as my life has proven. But I mean, unless there was something horrible to happen with my family or something where I needed to move back for a time, of course I would. But I have no desire. I love my country. I feel so thankful to have been raised there, grew up in a wonderful state with an amazing family. I miss my family. Of course I miss my family. They just need to move to Switzerland.
Yeah, sure.
But no plans to move back. Yeah.
So let me kind of start wrapping it up here. What do you feel like, we covered your story today. Like, what do you feel is the lesson of your story? We maybe hit on some aspects of it, but maybe put it in a bow, or what do you feel like is the lesson of your story?
It's hard to boil it down to one.
Sure.
However, one theme that remains consistent, in my view, is to always listen to that inner voice and to stay true to your values, no matter what the cost. Because as soon as you start straying off the path, even though you know what your true values are, but you start following after other people's visions of what they think you should do, or visions of success that the world tells you that you should have, or embracing other talents or opportunities that other people think you should do that are not in line with your values, you are going to end up far down a road where you are very unhappy, miserable, dealing with a whole lot of catastrophe that you could have avoided if you had stayed true to your values and that inner voice, which is always speaking to us, telling us which way to go and what you believe is truly right. And I think, and so long as you follow that voice, yes, it might be harder. It might be more challenging. There might be dark seasons, but you can always, at the end of the day, lay your head down at your pillow at night, knowing that you were true to your values. And that brings a level of peace that no amount of money, no amount of fame, no amount of success can ever bring.
Preach. Yes. Yes. I love that.
I really believe that.
So real quickly then, like, what are you doing now, right? I mean, you're in Switzerland. You've kind of alluded to you're getting your master's, you're teaching bar classes. What does your life look like right now in Switzerland?
Every day is something a little bit different, which I love. I started working at some fitness studios before the pandemic. It was a job that was offered to me. Honestly, I was in an indoor cycling class here in Zurich, and I never thought that teaching fitness would be something that would transition here, because I started in New York, because I figured that everything would be taught in German. And at that time I spoke no German, but all of the boutique fitness studios here in Switzerland, all the courses are conducted in English because there are so many expats here and that's the common language. So I was actually in an indoor cycling teacher indoor cycling class, and the teacher came up to me afterward and was like, "Are you a cycling coach? Are you a teacher?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Do you want to be one?" I was like, sure. This is how
Also-
my life works. I don't know how these things happen. This is why I say I make plans and then life interjects.
Yeah.
But then I started with the indoor cycling, and then I got bar certified, started teaching bar and Pilates. And so I teach 10 to 12 classes a week, as well as on an online platform as well, cycling and Pilates. And then I still have some of my communications clients that I do work for, digital media, content creation, videos, interviews, things of that nature. And that's all in the mental health field, which I love. So it's using my media skills in that way. I am pursuing a master's at the University of Zurich in Internet and Society, which is examining the effects of digital transformation on youth, mental health and well-being, as well as philosophy and ethics. So that's fun. I'm joining a professor in a research project this semester on mental health and well-being and technology. And I'm also getting my sailing license. So
maybe if you need to sail back to the United States, I guess you could.
That is actually my husband and I's plan. We've fallen in love with sailing. It's become a major hobby of ours. And I'm getting my sailing license in Malta in a couple weeks. And our plan is to have a boat, and in case anything catastrophic happens in the United States, we can sail across the Mediterranean down the St. Lawrence River to Detroit, pick up my parents, and sail back.
Okay, great. I'll meet you in Detroit if that happens, because me and my wife and 2 kids will just we'll just be like
Mexico and sail around for a couple months.
There you go. Yeah. We'll just be like Jonah and kind of stow away in the bottom of the boat if we need to.
Sounds good.
If anyone wants to see more about what you're doing, because you still have your foundation, correct?
Yes, I do. Yes, my family mostly runs it now. But yes, after my years Miss America, started a foundation with my family, which raises funds for eating disorder treatment. And we we not only do the treatment scholarships, but then we also have a virtual, it's a step down treatment program. So for people who are transitioning from a higher level of care back into real life, we have a virtual program as well. And we do lots of walks and events all over the country. So they can go to KirstenHaglundFoundation.org. Of course, we're on Instagram as well. I still have, it's funny, on Instagram, I'm still at Kirsten Haglund, because if I change my last name, then they take away my blue check mark. So I can't. But no one has a blue check mark on Twitter anymore. So,
Which is talking about the removing the blue check mark. I feel like your work in internet and society, that might be a good study, because it's like, well, it's keeping me trapped a little bit in my old name. Huh. Interesting psychology point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, I have a followers and a profile, and that's helpful for the work that I do with marketing our studio and the other communications work. So people, but still, it doesn't say, I'm pretty sure, I don't think it says, no, it doesn't say Miss America on my Instagram profile. So people would still have to be fishy to really try to figure it out somewhere, Yeah, I still have my main. So at Kirsten Haglund on Instagram, if you want to follow what we're doing there.
Well, Kirsten Mueller-Daubermann.
Kirsten Mueller-Daubermann, yeah?
Yeah, she, before we got on, she dared me to try to do it in my best German, and I wasn't going to try. So thank you for pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah.
Thank you for just sharing your story, being open and honest with us on That Was Stupid, and we really appreciate the time that you took. And man, enjoy Switzerland. I just love hearing that. Not just as a friend, hearing just how you're thriving there now. I just love it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, John, for the great work you're doing with the podcast, and it was great to be on your show.
Well, hey, thank you for joining us for the That Was Stupid podcast. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Some really insightful things that Kirsten said there that I think we can all take to heart. Before we go, just a reminder, please like and subscribe to the show, and we are going to be bringing you many more movers, shakers, business leaders, regular Joes and Janes who have incredible stories. And so we will see you back here next week for That Was Stupid.